All right, so we're diving into this whole North Korea, South Korea thing, right? It's October 2024, and things are getting kind of tense.
Yeah, Tens is putting it mildly,
Yeah,
Ray.
we're looking at reports from ABC, Fox, Al Jazeera, and the South China Morning Post, all these different angles to try and get a handle on what's really going on.
What's got everyone's attention is how quickly things have escalated.
Right.
I mean, we've gone from like trash and balloons, which is weird enough on its own,
Right.
to accusations of like military drones and threats of, war.
Yeah, it's not like someone just turned up the volume knob a little. It's a whole different beast now. So for people just catching up, what was the, I don't know, the match that lit this fire?
This time around.
Mm.
It seems to be drones, which is,
Drones, all right?
not your typical diplomatic tool. Basically, North Korea is claiming that South Korea has been sending these drones over the border right into their airspace.
Bold move.
Yeah, and not just for a flyby. They're saying these drones were dropping leaflets, propaganda, all very critical of North Korea, right over their capital city, Pyongyang.
So imagine you're Kim Jong-un just trying to enjoy your morning coffee, and suddenly there's a drone dropping leaflets about how much whatever. Not the best way to start the day.
You'd probably be a little more than annoyed. I mean, they're calling it a dangerous provocation, saying their trigger's been released.
Yeah.
It's not exactly subtle.
No, not at all. It sounds like they're ready to throw down. So what's South Korea saying for themselves? Are they fessing up to the drone drops?
That's where things get a little murky.
Yeah.
South Korea did issue a denial, but it was vague. Their defense minister just said, "We have not done that." And that's it.
Okay, so not exactly a resounding no then, more like we didn't do it, but ...
Exactly. Leaving everyone to wonder, if not them, then who? And that kind of ambiguity just ramps up the tension even more.
And then, as if things weren't tense enough already, Kim Jong-un's sister, who's a pretty big deal in North Korea, right?
Extremely influential.
She starts making some pretty inflammatory statements.
Yeah, she did not hold back. Calling the situation suicidal for South Korea, threatening horrible disaster if these alleged drone flights don't stop. Even went after the South Korean military directly, called them, and I quote here, dregs and mongrels tamed by Yankees.
Dregs and mongrels. Wow, that's harsh, even for someone known for, colorful language. Makes you think, is this really just about some leaflets, or is there something bigger going on here?
It's definitely about more than just leaflets, those kinds of personal insults. They're designed to undermine South Korea's leaders, make them look weak, and stir up that nationalist feeling within North Korea itself. It's classic, really.
So it's psychological warfare. They're using words as weapons.
Exactly. And you know what? It works. It
Yeah.
gets them attention, puts pressure on their rivals.
Right.
Whether it'll actually get them what they want, that's a different story.
Because it's not just talk, they've actually taken action, too. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where things get really serious. They blew up sections of roads and railways that connected them with South Korea.
Blowing up roads, that seems extreme.
It was mostly symbolic. Those links weren't really being used anyway. But symbolism matters. It's a powerful image. Like they're literally cutting off ties.
Yeah, no more mixed messages there. And then they went and ordered their troops on the border to be ready to open fire if they see any more drones. Which, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like they're messing around.
Ready to open fire. It's meant to alarm, to put everyone on edge. It's classic North Korea. This is a regime that thrives on being unpredictable, maybe even a little bit crazy. It keeps their opponents guessing, keeps them off balance. It's all part of the strategy.
So is this all a bluff then? A lot of noise, but no real bite? Or do we actually need to be worried here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
North Korea has this long history of pushing things to the brink, seeing how far they can go. The problem is sometimes people miscalculate. And those miscalculations, they can have some pretty serious consequences.
And it's not just the drones and the threats. Remember a few months back, all those balloons filled with trash.
Oh yeah, the infamous trash balloons.
Landing in South Korea, what was that about? Just trying to get a rise out of them?
Partly, yeah. Since May, thousands of these balloons filled with trash. We're talking paper, plastic, even, get this, manure.
Manure, seriously, that's just wrong.
Landed in South Korea. It's partly retaliation, they claim. They say South Korea was sending balloons with anti-North Korea leaflets first. So they're like, oh, you want to play this game? Two can play this game.
Except their version involves, literal garbage. So we've got this weird propaganda war with literal garbage being weaponized.
It sounds ridiculous, but that's the point. It gets attention, it provokes a reaction, and it highlights how tense things really are.
Yeah, it's not exactly a friendly game of volleyball, that's for sure. And then there's the whole Russia situation. That's a whole other can of worms, right?
Definitely. We have to talk about Russia. This is big.
Because it's not just South Korea that North Korea seems to have it out for. What's going on with them and Russia?
Well, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he's made some pretty serious accusations. He's saying North Korea is sending soldiers to help Russia with their war in Ukraine.
Wait, North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine? How does that even happen?
It's potentially a huge deal.
Hmm.
If it's true, it means those two countries, both kind of isolated from the rest of the world, both at odds with a lot of the West, they're finding common ground. And that's got a lot of people worried.
It seems like a strange move for North Korea. What do they gain by getting involved in a war that's, thousands of miles away?
There are a few theories. One, maybe it's about money. Russia needs help, and they might be paying North Korea for it. Hard currency is valuable when you're under sanctions.
Right.
Two, maybe North Korea wants access to Russian weapons or their military tech.
Makes sense.
Or maybe, and this is a little more abstract, but maybe it's a show of solidarity. Like they're saying to the West, see, we're not the only ones who don't like the way you do things.
It's like they're picking sides in a global showdown. So we've got drones, leaflets, trash balloons, threats of basically ending the world, roads getting blown up, and now maybe North Korean soldiers showing up in Ukraine. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And what's really striking is the timing of it all. We're weeks away from the U.S. presidential election, and it's hard not to think that Kim Jong-un is trying to use all this, influence things, or at least make sure North Korea is on everyone's mind.
So it's all perfectly timed to cause maximum chaos, right, when the U.S. is, a little distracted. But what's the end game here? Does he really think he can, bully his way into getting what he wants?
That's the big question, isn't it? To understand that, we need to get inside Kim Jong-un's head a little bit, figure out what's motivating him, what he hopes to achieve.
Well, you've definitely got our attention. We'll need to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's dive into that. What's the method behind the madness? What's Kim Jong-un really after? So before we went away, we were talking about Kim Jong-un, and, it seems like he's playing pretty high-stakes game here, right?
Yeah, we've seen this playbook before. Provocations, threats, it's all part of a pattern. They use these crises to try to force concessions, get the world to pay attention to their demands.
So it's like a power play, but with, potentially catastrophic consequences if it backfires. What's he really trying to win here? What does Kim Jong-un actually want?
Fundamentally, it's the same things they've always wanted. Recognition on the world stage as a legitimate nuclear power, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, get those sanctions lifted, those economic sanctions that are really crippling them.
So it's about survival in a way, at least from their perspective. They see these weapons as their shield, right?
That's exactly it. They're convinced, and it's deeply ingrained, that having nuclear weapons is the only way they can guarantee their own security. They're terrified of an invasion by the U.S., by South Korea, whoever. That fear is real, it's rooted in history, and it drives a lot of their decision-making.
So when we see these actions, these provocations, as crazy as they seem to us, to them, it's about self-preservation.
Exactly. They're trying to project this image of strength, of unpredictability. It's almost like they're saying, we have these weapons, we're not afraid to use them, so you better take us seriously. And look, it's worked before.
Right, like back in 2017 with all the missile tests, the whole world was on edge, remember? Fire and fury, it was intense.
Yeah.
But it also got them that summit with Trump.
Right, exactly. Didn't solve everything, obviously, but it did get them the seat at the table, got them talking directly to the U.S. president. That's a big win for them, at least symbolically.
So there is a method to the madness. But at what cost? Right. This can't be sustainable forever, can it? To be this isolated, this economically choked off from the rest of the world.
That's the big question, isn't it? How long can they keep this up? Those sanctions are hitting them hard, and the pandemic, well, that didn't help. It's a tough situation, even if they did bring it on themselves, in a way.
It's like they're trapped in a corner of their own making. They want security, so they build weapons, but those weapons make everyone else nervous, so they get isolated, which makes them feel even less secure.
It's a vicious cycle. And then there's the Russia situation. That adds a whole other layer of, volatility to all of this.
Right, like things weren't complicated enough already. Having the possibility of North Korean soldiers actually fighting in Ukraine, that's a game changer.
Absolutely. If that turns out to be true, it's a sign of a deepening alliance between two countries that, well, let's just say they both have reasons to be suspicious of the West, of the U.S. in particular.
It's like they're forming their own bloc, a counterweight to the existing world order. So, all right, putting on my optimistic hat for a second, What are the chances this gets resolved peacefully? What are the options?
Well, nobody wants to see this escalate into a war, obviously. So South Korea, their allies, the U.S., they're all walking this tightrope, trying to deter North Korea without provoking them, which is a tough needle to thread.
So how do you do that? How do you stand firm against a bully without, making them angrier?
It takes a lot of careful diplomacy, a lot of communication behind the scenes, and it has to be coordinated, especially between the U.S. and South Korea. That alliance, that's key right now.
Speaking of alliances, what about China? They're the ones with the most influence over North Korea, aren't they? Can't they just, tell them to chill out?
China's in a tough spot, to be honest.
Yeah.
They don't love what North Korea's doing, all this instability right on their border, not ideal. But they also don't want to see the regime collapse. Chaos in North Korea would be a nightmare for China.
Refugees, instability, who knows what else. It's a mess they don't want to have to clean up, so what do?
They walk this tightrope too, trying to rein in North Korea without pushing too hard. It's all about leverage. And nobody have the perfect answer right now.
So what you're saying is this could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's a very fluid situation, a lot of moving parts. It's why this is so worrying, even if we've seen it before. Predicting what happens next, it's anybody's guess.
Well, that's not exactly what I was hoping to hear, but I appreciate the honesty. So where do we go from here? What happens if Kim Jong-un's gamble doesn't pay off?
Yeah, it's kind of like, trying to predict the weather sometimes.
Yep.
You can look at the models, the historical data, but there's always that element of, will it rain or won't it?
So you're saying with North Korea, sometimes you just have to throw your hands up and say, who knows?
Not exactly. I mean, we can make educated guesses. We know what they want. We've seen them pull this kind of thing before, but
Yeah.
they also like to keep everyone guessing. It's part of their strategy.
Keeps them in the headlines, that's for sure. But, okay, let's play this out. Let's say, for whatever reason, Kim Jong-un's little game here, it doesn't work. No sanctions relief, no summit, no concessions. What then? Does he just back down?
Backing down. Kim Jong-un. I don't think that's really in his DNA, is it? Everything about him, his image, his power, it's all about strength, defiance, admitting defeat. That's not a good look for a dictator.
Okay, so if he can't win by, winning, what's his next move? How does he escalate from here?
That's the scary part, isn't it? We could see more missile tests, bigger, bolder, or, and this is the worst case scenario, but it's been floated before, he could even go for another nuclear test.
Another nuclear test. Seriously, that seems like a really bad idea, even for him.
Nobody wants to see that. The world has enough problems without North Korea adding a nuclear explosion to the mix. But we have to remember, they don't always play by the same rules. Rationality, that's not always their strong suit.
So it's like they're holding the world hostage, and the ransom demands are, let's just say, they're not exactly reasonable.
It's a dangerous game, no question.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should give up hope. Diplomacy can still work. There are back channels, there are people working behind the scenes to find a solution that doesn't end in disaster. We have to believe that's possible.
I want to believe that. But it's hard, sitting here feeling like the whole thing's out of our control. What can anyone even do when it's a problem on this scale? It's paralyzing.
That's exactly what they want you to feel. Powerless. But we're not powerless. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about what's going on, the better equipped we are to make informed choices, to support leaders who are trying to find real solutions.
So basically, stay informed, stay engaged, don't let the fear shut you down.
Exactly. Don't just doom scroll, do something. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your elected officials. Let them know you care about this, that you want peace, not more conflict.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? Whatever happens in North Korea, it affects all of us.
100%. We're interconnected, whether we like it or not. So we have to find a way to coexist, to build a future where these kinds of crises aren't the norm. It's a tall order, but it's the only way forward.
Well said. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into the North Korea situation. We've covered a lot of ground, looked at a lot of different angles.
We've seen how quickly things can escalate, how fragile the peace really is.
It's a lot to process, and honestly, it's a little scary. But hopefully, by understanding the complexities, by talking about it, by staying engaged, we can all play a part in creating a more peaceful future. Thanks for listening.